Isabel is expecting her 5th child any day now. Erasmus has a heart condition so severe that he has been unable to work for 12 months. And today they have been evicted from the hovel they were squatting in. Their story, as I filmed it, was to bring home very starkly what it means to live and die in the shanty towns that today ring Lima, Peru. But why have the Celestina family, like so many before them, ended up on this patch of sand? The road that led them into the dark of despair began here in Peru's glorious high Andes.
Manang alintatyo pisilang papa karota vida inaspa.
Life is not good at all. It's very expensive. There are only a few potatoes. I sow barley and potatoes, but there's not much harvest. For this reason, things are not good. And I want to get away. Beans and potatoes are scarce, and I've gathered very little. I seem to be working for nothing here. I want to go somewhere else. If I went as a worker to Lima, I might find a better kind of life and be able to educate my children.
This search for a better life takes tens of thousands of families down from the Altiplano, the mountain peaks and high plateaus where their ancestors eked out an existence for thousands of years. The land that was the birthright of a golden civilization yields today's peasant little reason to stay. Starting down from the high Andes on an ancient high road built for the Incas, that noble caste of emperors who conquered the Aymara tribes of the Altiplano and established their capital here at Cusco. This was the center of the universe and the capital of an empire that stretched from Chile to Colombia and from Peru to Argentina. The Incas ruled 20 million Indians for more than 4 centuries until the Spanish conquest in 1532. It is here, along Cusco's narrow streets of fitted stones, dating from the Inca period, that the peasant first comes down to look for work in the bustling market. Peasants from the surrounding countryside display their brightly colored wool, their fruit and vegetables. But it's a futile trek for the impoverished peasant who can only offer his bare hands and burning desire to work. For jobs are scarce, and the disheartening search often ends in a handful of coca leaves. The soothing oblivion eases the cramps of hunger and dulls the harsh reality of bitter prospects and little hope. Even in Inca times, scratching a living from the land wasn't easy. But despite the Inca's tyrannical social system, no one, however humble, went without food, work or housing. 20 years after the conqueror Francisco Pizarro had moved his capital to Lima, down on the coast, half of the highland Indian population had died from forced labor in the mines. The land was left in the hands of a few Spanish noblemen. The Indians became slaves. And until 6 years ago, 144 years after Simón Bolívar won independence from Spain, 1,000 families still controlled 60% of the land under cultivation. In 1968, a small group of colonels assumed power. It was the first government in the history of Republican Peru to be actively concerned with doing something positive to help the peasants. They gave back 6 million hectares to 300,000 peasant families and made it illegal for anyone to own more than 300 acres of land. But in spite of this, the average yearly income outside the capital is still only $50. And even the stupendous beauty of the most famous Inca architectural marvel, the hidden fortress city of Machu Picchu, isn't strong enough to keep the peasant on his ancestral land. unless the present regime implements its land reform program, the people will continue to flow into Lima, where 3.5 million of Peru's 14 million people already struggle for jobs and money. This is the end of the road from the mountains. The peasant brings his fragile hopes to the center of commercial, industrial, and administrative power in Peru. Here in the main square of Lima stands the statue of Francisco Pizarro, the only public monument to a conqueror in the South American continent. In the Plaza des Armes, the military government makes its plans for the future, attempting to give equal opportunity to all its citizens. But beyond the graceful colonial architecture and modern skyscrapers of the city center lie what will be the immigrants' new reality, the barriadas, the shanty towns. There are 307 of these sprawling slums, and half of the metropolis lives in them. The family which arrives in Lima today is likely to settle in the newest of these, El Salvador, which means the savior. It's home to over 200,000 souls in the care of one man, 50-year-old Chicago-born Father Joe Walijewski.
It gives you the impression, you might say, this is a scene in the moon. You perhaps maybe seen pictures in the moon. This is the impression that gave me when I first came here from Wisconsin, a place where there were trees, there was woods, nature, and you come out over here into this desert and see the barrenness of the place where there's no life, there's no trees here at all, no flowers. And to think that 200,000 people will come here and put up their homes in a place like this, I couldn't see very much hope. But then as the people start coming little by little, at first there were 8,000 families, and then more families came in, now 15,000, and now today there's 23,000 families. I often thought to myself, well, how can these people find hope in this dirt, in this desert that we have over here? Because I see they came with their ideas that they had in the mountains to find a new hope, a new way of life.
To understand this way of life and how he coped with it, we lived with Father Joe. And we soon learned that he was on call 24 hours a day to answer whatever problems were brought to his door, like the Celestino family, who arrived early one morning. Despite her appearance, Isabel is only 28 years old. She explained that they had been living in Lima until Erasmus was struck by a serious heart condition which lost him his job as a plumber's mate. Unable to pay the sky-high rent, they had squatted in an unfinished building in the suburbs until this morning when the owner evicted them. Penniless and unable to provide anything for herself and her children, and with every door shut to them, they came to Father Joe. Not because they're particularly religious, or even go to church, but with a touching blind faith that they won't be turned away. Whatever his plans for the day might have been, Father Joe now decided that with Isabel's baby due at any moment, something had to be done at once. He took them to the office of Sinamos, a government agency set up to help destitute people like the Celestinos. The help is not merely government propaganda. Sinamos is empowered to make immediately available to each family a patch of sand 20 meters by 7. To actually buy it, you have to pay 900 soles, nearly 10 pounds, have the correct papers, and prove that you don't hold land anywhere else in Peru. The Celestino family have no money or papers. The problem of mass migration from the impoverished countryside to the overcrowded cities in search of work isn't unique to Peru. Every major Latin American city grows by the creation of slums, whether they are called favelas, callampas, villamizerias, or barriadas. They are created out of necessity by those who invade the land and build their houses out of whatever is to hand. But in Peru, the slums are now called Pueblo Jóvenes, young towns, a name given to them by a Roman Catholic bishop, Luis Bambaran, who went to jail in 1971 for protesting against the eviction of squatters. As a result of his efforts, El Salvador became the first Latin American shantytown under government control.
Un autor. Ya. Muy bien, entonces ese es el terreno que van a querer. Ya.
So the government allows the Celestinos to become the legal occupants of this tiny plot of land. But still, it's no more than a desolate patch of sand in the middle of winter, and miles from any recognizable amenities. They're still without a home unless something can be built before nightfall.
I see very, very dim. As the situation being as it is now, very, very dim. Because of the fact that, like I explained, the situation is, he is in a bad state, she is the same manner, the children, she has 2 more children. These are the only 2 that she brought along. She has 2 other children that are in school. So that's 4. And there's another one coming in the world. That's 5 children. See, I would consider this as an emergency, yes.
If you hadn't been here, what would happen to this family?
What would really happen? That's a very, very good question. I couldn't say what would be the condition.
You have 200,000 parishioners. How can you divide yourself to help them?
That is a very good question. You know what? I am a human being. I only have 2 hands and I have 2 feet. What can I really do to really help these 200,000 people? You know, there's an old saying that do your best and God will do the rest. I think the guy upstairs is going to help me in this problem, I think.
Is that enough, Father, leaving it in his hands?
Well, what else can I do?
But Father, looking at their faces now,
Yes.
they look hopeless.
Yes.
How do you give them hope for tomorrow? How do you give them the will to live?
First of all, when they first came to me, they had no hope. They had no hope. They had no place to go. Now, I've given some hope by going to the dirigentes, getting Sinamos to get them this land. Over here, they have some hope at the present moment. Now, they're going to bring their things here. They're going to put up their house. See, hope is something you build up piece by piece.
Hope grows slowly in El Salvador. When new immigrants first arrive, they put up a shack of estera, a sort of woven matting. And when they have enough money, they buy a few bricks, pile them neatly outside their huts till they have enough to build a very basic house. There are practically no amenities in El Salvador. Water, for instance, a fact of life we all take for granted, doesn't exist. In El Salvador, there is 1 tap for every grupo, or unit of 394 huts. So it's simpler to buy the water, which, if you have the money, costs 9p a barrel. That is, if you can get it, as the water bowser, being run by private enterprise, doesn't have a regular schedule. But the basic problem of El Salvador is massive unemployment. 65% of the population have no permanent work, and 20% of the women are abandoned. They trek vainly into Lima looking for work, but there too the government admits there is serious unemployment and substantial subemployment. At rock bottom, they scavenge the rubbish bits for tin that sells at 20p a kilo. There is only 1 government-run outpatients clinic for over 200,000 people, and most patients can't afford the money for prescriptions. Obstetrics and emergencies have to go to Lima. There are 30,000 school children in El Salvador, and far too few schools and teachers. And few families can afford the second-hand uniforms, books and pencils. So most children drop out after 3 years. After Father Joe had organized a truck to collect the Celestinos' belongings, he rushed back to his church to perform a more traditional pastoral duty, the service of baptism. But in the biggest parish in the world, there wasn't only 1 baby waiting, there were 40. And few actually are babies. This is because the parents have to save for up to 3 years to pay the £2 or £3 for christening outfits for their children. Money also influences the choice of godparents.
Padrini system is the godfather and the godmother in baptism. They generally choose a godfather and godmother that have money. We've noticed in our records that the majority of the godfather and godparents are from Lima. So there's a close relationship between the godchild and the godparent. And so when the child is in hunger, has anything to eat, the mother will send the child to their godparents to ask for money or for food. Maybe that's another way that they survive. I had an example of this about 3 months ago, where the mother came to me and said she wanted her child to be baptized again. I said, why do you want it to be baptized again? He says, because the godparents were killed in an accident, and he has no godparents. So that's the reason why she wanted to be baptized, to get another godparent.
Peru, like the rest of Latin America, can be called a Catholic country. But Catholicism is more a survival of a Spanish Indian tradition than the product of a currently active Christian life. Most of the Indian population is at least nominally Catholic through baptism, yet over half the Indians have no priest they can turn to. The Peruvian church has never been able to fulfill its own needs for clergy, because during the days of the Spanish rule, the Indians were considered subhuman and certainly not fit for the priesthood. Consequently, there's been a large foreign presence in the church. Today, 61% of the priests in Peru are foreigners, like Father Joe.
Javier, yo te bautizo en el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Zoila, yo te bautizo en el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Dígame. Yo te bautizo en el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Miriam, yo te bautizo en el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Amén. Padre, Hijo y Espíritu Santo. Amén. Bendíganos, Señor, y esta mesa y a todos aquí presentes, y especialmente bendiga a los que no tienen para comer.
Barring emergencies, Sunday lunch in the workshop behind the church is the only chance Father Joe has even to remotely relax. It was prepared by his elder sister Noel, a nurse, who a year ago came out to El Salvador to help him and set up a clinic 15 minutes drive from the church. Life is simple in a small house with no running water, not very different from the house where Father Joe grew up, in Wisconsin. He was the second youngest child born to impoverished Polish immigrants. But even over lunch, Father Joe discusses the problems of the parish with the visiting priest and the social workers who help him in El Salvador.
Of course, at 2 o'clock, let's see, what do we got? Well, it's the blessing of the bus. The Acho bus, we want to have one of their buses blessed. And then at 3 o'clock, let's see, what do we got? Oh, yes, we got a funeral. The boy that drowned, they're going to bury him this afternoon at 3 o'clock. The
day before, 21-year-old Luis Alcoron drowned while swimming with friends in a river not far from El Salvador. A keen football fan, his shirt drapes the coffin.
Tú abrirás mis labios y publicar mi boca tu alabanza. Dale, Señor, descanso eterno y la luz perpetua alumbre. Que se creen en él, Señor, los huesos quebrantados. ahora seguimos en procesión. El que pide estuvo marcado con el celo de la Santísima Trinidad. Tú que vives y reinas por los siglos de los siglos. Amén. Líbrame, Señor, de la muerte eterna en aquel día tremendo en que se han conmovido el cielo y la tierra, cuando venga a juzgar al mundo por el fuego. Libérame, Domine, de muerte eterna, in die más tremenda, cuando
From the half-finished house in the suburb that Isabel's baby was due any minute, 48-year-old Mrs. Victoria Ramirez. Isabel's elder children, 13-year-old Maria and 10-year-old Mariano, left school early to help out and carefully dragged what seemed to us useless bits of junk out to the truck. As we filmed them, we wondered to what possible use they could put 52 pieces of wood, 1 door, 2 broken bed frames, 2 pieces of tattered matting, 3 mattresses and assorted bits of threadbare bedding, 2 rickety tables, 1 rusty chair, 3 drawers, 3 plastic bags of rags, a piece of broken glass, a handful of rusty wire, a pile of newspapers, a book, a ball, 2 live ducklings, an orange cracked basin, a plastic 1-legged doll, 7 battered pots, a box of vegetables, and a prayer book. It was only when the truck was piled high that we realized that what was tied together with fragile bits of string represented the sum total of a lifetime of struggle for the family, and their only foundation for a new life.
I have to be everything here. I have to be a chauffeur here. I have to bring the people in emergency, for an example, day and night, be ready for them, to serve them. See, I came here not to be served, but to serve them. And so I find myself with a role in everything, even though maybe perhaps I don't know the answers to all their problems and so forth. For an example, you see a house that's on fire. You might not be a fireman, but you're going to do everything to extinguish that house. But I see that there's a need at these people that are without work. So I have to do something, even though I don't know how to go about it, but I make a lot of mistakes, it's true. But we're doing something about it to help these people, not just cry over with them, but you got to do something to help them, see. And that's why I feel that my role is everything here. I can't say that this is my role or that is my role, it's everything.
So, Father, if you weren't a priest, would you be doing this sort of work?
If I were not a priest, I would do the same type of work, because that's the type of work that I like. Because in our family, we were poor. There were 9 of us in our family. And we had very many difficulties, problems, financial and so forth. And I know what it means to be without food, without any means of support, like going to a movie and so forth. When I come over here, I see these kids here, sometimes I feel the same way. I feel that I'm like a part of them too. So I say, well, come on, let's go to the movie. So we take the whole bunch and we go to the show. Things like that, I feel that I am a part of them because I suffered some of that poverty when I was in the state. Not as great, you might say, as they did, but that's the reason why I'm here. And I think I would, even though if I wasn't a priest, I would still come here and help these people out.
Do you think these people accept you, Father?
In the beginning, no. They say, well, what's that gringo doing here, you know? It's like a man coming from the moon, you know. They were running questionable, well, what's he here for, you know? And so, well, in the beginning I had to put on a Roman collar, you know, show that I was a priest, you know. And after a while, then they got to know me with what I was doing and so forth. Then I can come out now, like in my civvies, you know, they accept me now. Wherever I may go, they always greet me. I don't probably perhaps know their name because there's so many, 200,000 people. But they accept me. They know that I'm doing something here to help them. It's not just a lot of words. They see that there's action being done. I feel that I'm getting more from these people than I myself am able to give to the people themselves. And so I think in that sense that I'm gaining a lot here. Not only that, but you read about these things in the mission magazines and so forth, but you're right here, you're right with the people, you're living with among them. I think I gain more from these people. I feel sorry, perhaps, for the priests that are in the States, that are missing this in life, you know. Here we're seeing this here, we're helping these people out. Whereas there, they're worried about the doorbells and the telephones and so forth. Well, here we're really with humanity. In other words, really working with them, close to them. See, and I feel that I'm really living my religion over here. I'm really living my priesthood here in Villa El Salvador.
What do these people hope for, Father?
What do they hope for? For the future? Maybe in our sense, we don't see much hope in them. But in their view, there is hope here in Villa El Salvador. You might say, well, they have nothing here. They have no electricity here. They have no water here. They're just sand. Well, what hope do they really? They do have hope. They have hope that one day that land, which they're living on, is going to be theirs. That house that they're building is going to be theirs. See, that's the hope that they have. Their suffering is true, lack of water and electricity and so forth, but they have that hope that they'll be able to give something to their children, which they weren't able to do before. They were in Lima, the rent was sky high. If you couldn't pay the rent, they immediately evicted you and so forth. But here, nobody will evict them. That's their land, see. That's their home that they're building. And that's what they have, hope.
Dobla, pues.
The whole family takes a hand in putting the shack together, noticeably happier now that there is something constructive they can do. There are no foundations, and the construction, from platted straw panels, follows a very basic plan. Yet each straw panel costs £1, and although building on sand requires only the simplest of tools, a shovel is a luxury in the barriada.
La puerta, ¿cómo está? La puerta. Un hueco abajo. Eso es para... un hueco ahí.
Father Joe doesn't leave the family to put together its own home. He pitches right in and helps. Of course, he doesn't have the time to do this for every family that arrives in El Salvador. But he definitely feels that this is where he belongs, doing what is needed at the moment, hoping that others will see the value of a helping hand, even in the slum, where all too often it is every man for himself. The same priest who is there when children need to be baptized is there when the roof has to be put on. But what does he believe that religion and the sacraments really mean to the people of the barriadas?
Religion to them is like in the moon. In other words, what are they occupied at the present moment? They're occupied with their homes, as you see. They're occupied with finding work for themselves, clothing, school for the children. See, these are the things that they're occupied at the present moment. Well, what are we going to do as a church? Are we going to wait for these people to be ready for them to come to church? No. What will we do? What the church has to do is come to the people, and then maybe eventually they'll see that the church is not only occupied with things spiritual, but also with things that are physical.
And the next physical problem to confront Father Joe was in fact only 10 yards away across the sand. There he found 20-year-old Maria, frightened and in severe pain. She tried to explain that she'd been in labor for 2 days, but still the baby hadn't arrived.
2 semanas, ya creo menos. Y ahora de nuevo le he mandado a llamar, pero la señora va a cocinar todavía.
Not being well versed in the complications of an obstetric emergency, it finally dawned on Father Joe that something was so seriously wrong that unless Maria went to a doctor, it was impossible for the baby to be born, and Maria could die. But the nearest doctor was in Lima, and Maria had no one to look after her 2 small children. After considerable persuasion, Maria agreed to let Father Joe take her to Lima.
No tengo pena, ya vamos a... Pues no va a quedar mucho tiempo, ¿no? Porque es muy importante que se vaya.
Está colgado en la puerta de medio.
A neighbor promised to look after the children, and penniless, with no baby clothes or maternity preparations, and hardly able to walk, she took a childlike comfort in Father Joe's sturdy arms.
No hay medicinas, no hay ningún médico.
Backing Father Joe's down-to-earth approach is his bishop, Luis Bambaran, the bishop of the Barriadas, who sees his whole church's work in just this practical light.
My work is exclusively dedicated to working with the people who live in the so-called barriadas. That's on the outskirts of the city of Lima, and who make up about half of the city. I believe there is a difference between the work of the church in more developed countries, European countries, and in the countries of the third world. You in the developed countries have a government that assumes this responsibility. For example, it sets up an urban plan with housing and everything before the people go in. Here we have another reality. There are many difficulties to conquer. So we believe that everyone, government, church, private sector, all of us must join forces to solve the problems. In Lima, half of the people in the city are poor, and the other half, very good houses, good residences. So this is what we see. There is injustice.
Ese es el objetivo, la finalidad.
Our goal is that all the people have participation in power. But in fact, and in the new towns, we seek this participation in decision-making and in everything that corresponds to their lives. Not in what refers to the entire country, that's impossible, but in the decisions that refer to their own lives, their own community, whether a certain thing ought to exist or not, whether a new family should be taken in or not, to fix priorities among decisions. We try to get the people to take part, and so the organization of the Pueblos Jóvenes, the neighborhood organization, isn't just for the sake of building public works or collaborating with the government. It is a pressure organization.
We say that the organization is like a thorn that sticks in and hurts. And so when the government doesn't carry out its duty, then it is necessary to wound the government so it will carry it out.
But does Father Joe believe that the barriadas are a scandal in the Christian sense of the word?
Yes, in the sense that why are the barriadas existing? Because they were perhaps the exploitation of the people, of the capitalists, you might say. The reason why there is poverty in the world, because there is not the distribution of food and goods that God has given us amongst all people. God meant it that we should all have a good, decent meal, clothing, and so forth. But the thing is that it is not being distributed, this wealth, you may say, of the world amongst all people. And in that sense, I think there is a scandal. Why there should be poverty, in a sense, in the barriadas.
But do you think the Peruvian Revolution is helping the people in the barriadas?
In a sense, yes. I think that there's a beginning. It's something, you know. In all the countries that I've been in South America, I think I've seen hope here. Not all hope, but I mean hope in the sense that there is a start. There's something being done.
After hours of frantic work, and with the roof finally over their heads, and the hut organized into sleeping, eating, and kitchen areas, Isabel finally sat down to prepare the evening meal, bought with the money that Father Joe gave them. Supper was a modest affair, a soup made up of 2 pints of water, 7 potatoes, 4 penny worth of noodles, 3 tomatoes, and a clove of garlic. Total cost, 12 pence, to feed 7 people. No one in El Salvador can afford meat, and nobody of the age of 2 can afford to drink milk. With the children settled in another part of the hut, Isabel's thoughts turned to the imminent birth of her baby, and she told me about her first baby. She was pregnant at 14 in the mountains by a man who beat her violently. When the baby Maria was born, the father signed paternity documents and abandoned them. Destitute and with a tiny baby to feed, Isabel went to Lima, where she met Erasmo. They had 3 children, but weren't able to marry, as they didn't have the necessary papers. I asked her, perhaps naively, what she felt about her life. She shrugged. I was too young the first time. I didn't know anything about it. And at least, this man doesn't beat me. And she went on feeding her children. It had been a long day for everyone, but even late at night, Father Joe was surrounded by parishioners. Different ones this time, who'd come to feed on dreams that are the same the world over.
No voy a estar tranquilo hasta que vuelvan.
Siempre el mismo exagerado. Vámonos. ¿Tú crees que soy una tonta? No hagamos líos, déjalo para mañana. ¿Qué mañana? Esta noche me la van a pagar. Esta noche me la pagan.
It was nearly midnight when a young mother brought in her dying baby to be baptized. For this child, there was no time for christening robes or any liturgical formality.
¿El nombre está Ángel. Ángel, yo te bautizo en el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Amén. Muy bien, entonces ya no se olvide que hay que traer después cuando ya se sane, ¿no? Ya, entonces ella apunta todos los datos en la oficina después.
Father, how do they survive?
I often wonder myself, how do these people really survive? They live from day to day. For an example, if they have no food, maybe their neighbors will come up and help them along. They have a little food themselves, they'll share it, you might say, with their neighbor. You know, we talk about sometimes, oh, they're all Catholics, but they don't all come to Mass. But a lot of these people live their religion in their own homes. There's charity I've never seen anywhere in the parts of the world where I've been working, where they have little in life, and yet with the little things in life, they'll share it with their neighbors. See? The most difficult part of my work here is not so much because there's no sun out now, you know, or we won't have any sun here maybe for the next 3-4 months, or the idea that I don't have the comforts that I would have in the States. It's not suffering from that. It's suffering to listen to these people day in and day out. That's the hardest part of my work. What can I do to help them? I'm one. I only have 2 hands, 2 feet. What can I do to help these people? There's 200,000 of these people, and they don't all come at once, but they're coming with me day after day. I could be here all day long, and they're coming with their Padre. My house burned down. I have no place to go. Or the family where they were evicted from their home. Now they have to find a place for them. You know, this constantly goes on, and what can I do? If I was God, like I say, I could maybe turn this fan into bread so that they can have something to eat. But I'm one human being. What can I do to help them? It gets discouraging when you listen to it. So that's why sometimes I have to go to the ocean to get away from all this. See? They said, you're here all alone. I'm alone? I'm here all alone? I have to get away from the people that come here so often. It's not running away from their problems, but I'm a human being. I have to get my bearings too. So that's why I go to when I have a day off, whenever I do get a day off, I'm supposed to have a day off every Monday, but I generally don't. But when I do get off, I go over to the ocean just to be alone there with a big span of water, and they just feel free. The priesthood is a lonely life. Even though they say, well, you got so many people coming up to you. Like you mentioned to you, where do you go with your problem? The only person I have is the fellow upstairs. The Almighty God is the only one that I have to go to with my problems.
Why, in fact, did you come to the missions to South America?
Well, I had a few problems when I was in the seminary studying. Of course, God perhaps didn't give me all the intelligence that he gave to others, a talent. I had a little more difficulty in my studies, and so I made a promise to Almighty God that if he would pull me through to the seminary, I would dedicate 8 years of my priestly life to the poor in the mission. And that's the reason why I came here. And then I liked it so well here, so I stayed for 13 years. I'm still continuing working on it.
Isabel now has a house for her family, a house that Father Joe helped to build. But he believes that he's building something more, creating hope in a community where very little exists, building the dignity that comes to people who are helped to help themselves. Father Joe is a simple man. Isabel too sees things simply, and she believes that she's been given a future. Isabel, are you really happy?